We got a side-by-side comparison between the Fujifilm XT5 and the Fujifilm XT3, y'all. And I'll be sharing my thoughts and providing you with my personal opinion on whether or not you should consider an upgrade. By the end of this video, I hope you'll have gained valuable insights to aid in your decision-making process. Let's start off with the build quality. At a glance, both of these cameras look identical. The same buttons and dials you are accustomed to with the XT line, you got everything the same. You got your ISO dial, you got your shutter speed dial, and as well the exposure compensation dial. And for the most part, it's the same buttons and dials placement minus some subtle differences, minor differences. So what's different? The battery on the XT3 is using the old lame square batteries, and I just remember every time I used it for shoots, I would go through a couple of them or more depending on how long it was. The XT5 is using the current battery that you can find in the XT4, the XT5, the XH2S, the XH2, the new GFX cameras. The battery life is so much better with this camera than it is on the XT3. I find the battery life on the XT5 to be one of the bright spots of this camera. I raved about this in my XT5 review, calling the battery life the GOAT. It's truly amazing, but your mileage may vary depending on what you shoot. They both got the same dual card slot. They both have the same EVF, the 3 million dots EVF, and I think it's fine. It gets the job done. It's not as good as the Fujifilm XH2S EVF, but I find for most cases, it's fine. The LCD screen is also the same 3-way tilt for all you photography cool kids out there, and both of these cameras are weather sealed. And when we go to the side of the cameras, we still see that the XT3's side door opens in one long piece, showing off the mic jack and the headphone jack. It also shows the USB-C port and as well as a micro HDMI jack. The XT5, however, side ports is divided up into two small doors. At the top, you have the mic jack and the remote jack, not a headphone jack, which is shocking. And at the bottom side doors, you have your USB-C port and as well your micro HDMI jack. Again, subtle differences that I don't think people should really care about, but I guess Fujifilm has to make these changes so people don't think that they're lazy. The Fujifilm XT5 does have something that the XT3 doesn't, and that is Ibis. The XT5 has 7 stops of image stabilization and the XT3 has 0 stops of image stabilization, and that means that the XT3 has none. The handling is where I find the XT3 feels a bit more substantial in my hands. I love the way it feels when I hold it. It just has a bit more weight to it. Fujifilm has opted to go for a cheaper, lighter plastic material on the XT5, but when you go back and forth, you do notice it. This is the XT3 and this is the XT5. And it seems like Fuji cheaped out on the materials on the XT5 after giving us like a bit more premium materials on the XT3. I've seen the internet saying that they don't like how the XT5 feels in your hands. I do understand your frustration. However, saying that, I do appreciate the lightweight on the XT5. I find the lightweight to be valuable as I use this camera for my travels. And after using it for a few days, like I totally forgot that, you know, it's like a cheaper material. The performance of this camera do make up for that plasticky feeling body. And in order to appreciate the XT5, you must use it for like at least a week to get used to its handling. Otherwise, if you just go into the camera store and just held it for the first time for a few minutes, of course you'll be disappointed. Just give it a fair shot before you go and pass judgment. But don't let your first impressions of the build fool you, because it's what's underneath the hood that matters. Let's talk about performance. The Fujifilm X-T5 is equipped with the latest X Processor 5. And this unlocks some awesome features that we're going to discuss in a moment. And because of this processor, the autofocusing is much smarter, being able to detect birds, drones, insects, cars, planes, trains, animals, eyes as well. The XT3 has the old processor, the X Processor 4, and the older sensor, and it does feel a step slow compared to the XT5. Here is the autofocusing test between the two cameras, and you can see how far the XT5 was able to track Hillary from, whereas the XT3 doesn't pick her up until she got closer to the camera. When it comes to autofocusing, you do feel the quick and snappiness coming from the XT5. The lenses feel quicker on this camera than on the XT3 as well. Both of these cameras have eye face tracking, but I don't trust the XT3 eye tracking as much as I do the XT5. But I would say if you don't do anything demanding, the XT3's autofocusing is more than enough. Another thing the XT5 can do that the XT3 can't do is the XT5 has a maximum electronic shutter speed of 1/180,000th of a second. That's an increase of approximately 2.5 stops compared to other X series cameras. And use it with wide apertures and extremely bright environments for more creative options, or use it to freeze action at the perfect moment. And this is just freaking insane in my opinion. Like in the Algarve, it does get like super bright here. And if you want to shoot something with a wider aperture to get that shallow depth of field, even at your lowest ISO with your maximum shutter, it won't cut it here. It's still overexposed. I shot the lowest, which is ISO 100, and then I shot wide open at f1.4, and it was like 2 stops overexposed. So I do appreciate the XT5 can switch over to the electronic shutter speed and cut the light down really, really well. This is good for anyone living in Sunnytown and you don't want to close down your aperture. A lot of third-party lenses provide f0.95 lenses. If you guys want to shoot at a wide open in a bright sunny day, you're going to need this camera to make that happen. But the XT3 is no slouch either. And this is something that you don't see in other cameras, I believe. Like my Panasonic S5 can only do up to 1/8000 and it can't go past that. And then you also got the Sony a7 IV, which is the same. It can do over 1/4000 of a second. So like you're getting a lot in this crop censored cameras. It's amazing. The XT3 does have something up its sleeve though that the XT5 cannot do. It can shoot 30 frames per second blackout free with its electronic shutter at 1.25 times crop, whereas the XT5 tops out at 20 frames per second electronic shutter, also at 1.25 times crop. And even though the XT5 has the latest processor, I think the reason why there is less frames per second is due to its high megapixel files. When it comes to image quality, both of the images are good from both cameras. If you want the latest film simulations like the classic negative and the nostalgic negative, you would want to upgrade to the XT5. But if you're okay without it, then I see these two images to be quite comparable to each other. The only real difference is if you want to blow an image up with the XT5 files, or you want the 40 megapixel sensor because you do a lot of cropping in your photographies. This could benefit you having this 40 megapixel camera. The 26 megapixel is still great though. I've been shooting with this sensor for years and I just absolutely just love the quality of the photos I've gotten with using this sensor. Up until recently, most of the shots you've seen came from this sensor. Whether it's from the XT3, the XT4, or the XS10, it's the same sensor. It takes beautiful images and I just know how good this sensor is. And take it from me, there's a reason why this sensor is still being used in the XS20. Being that it's a 5-year-old sensor, it's that good. So don't feel bad or have the sense of FOMO if you feel that you're missing something by not getting the 40 megapixel sensor. Let's move on to the video specs. Now this is where the Fujifilm XT5 shines. It has a robust video features. It can film up to 6.2K 30p, it can do 4K 60 with a slight crop, it can do all this at 10-bit 422, and it has f-log 2. Whereas the XT3 can only film up to 4K 60, 10-bit 420, and if you want to film in 422, it requires an extra step, which is to get an external monitor and connect it via HDMI. And the XT3 only has f-log 1, not f-log 2. So should you upgrade from the XT3 to the XT5? And the answer is always going to be yes, waste your money. I don't care. You're an adult. Do whatever you want. Do I need to handhold you into doing everything? I'm just kidding though. Don't do that. The real answer is it depends on your needs and wants, okay? Because all you guys are like snowflakes, you know? Each one of you guys are unique in your needs and your wants. So I've compiled some things that I think are noteworthy of upgrading to the XT5. You should upgrade to the XT5 if you want a better battery life. The battery life is amazing. You should upgrade if you want an improved autofocusing system. I don't trust the XT3's tracking as much as I do the XT5. You should upgrade if you want the 40 megapixel sensor. The people who know will know that they need the 40 megapixel sensor. For people that don't know whether or not you need it, chances are you might not need it. Other than that, if you don't need these things, chances are you are still probably good with the Fujifilm XT3. The XT3 is still a dope camera. I love that camera. I've taken a lot of photos with this camera as well. It's one of my favorites because, again, it shares the same sensor as the XS10. And only upgrade if you have gas. I think that's always fun to upgrade, right? Like, just know you might regret it. But it's okay because you fed into your gas, and that's always better than obsessing about the camera. And if you don't like it, I hope your camera store has a good return policy because you can always return it, right? It's not the end of the world. You know what your needs and wants are better than I do. And if you require further assistance, please watch more reviews from other creators in the space to get a better overall comprehensive idea so you can make a well-informed decision. If you're interested in any of these cameras, links are down below. And if you find this video helpful, consider subscribing to my channel where I talk about Fujifilm gear and photography tips. Thanks so much.